In the fall of 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area took a regular over-the-counter pain reliever for ordinary reasons. A headache, a cold. Everyday pain that millions of Americans treat with medication every single day without a second thought. They opened a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol. They took a capsule, and they died. Not from an overdose, not from an allergic reaction, not from anything that the human body does on its own. Someone had opened those bottles before them. Someone had carefully removed capsules, filled them with potassium cyanide, one of the most lethal substances known to exist, and placed them back in the bottles, sealed them, put them back on store shelves across the Chicago area, and then waited. 7 people died in the fall of 1982 from those capsules. 7 ordinary people who did nothing more dangerous than reach for a bottle of pain reliever. The person who put that cyanide in those capsules has never been identified, has never been charged, has never been held accountable for 7 murders that changed the way Americans think about the safety of the products they buy. More than 40 years later, the Chicago Tylenol murders remain one of the most consequential and most chilling unsolved crimes in American history. This is the story of what happened, and it starts with a 12-year-old girl. Mary Kellerman was 12 years old. She lived with her parents in Elk Grove Village, Illinois, a suburb northwest of Chicago. On the morning of September 29, 1982, she woke up with a runny nose and a sore throat. Her parents gave her 1 extra-strength Tylenol capsule, the kind of thing parents across the country do every day without hesitation, and sent her to the bathroom. She collapsed on the bathroom floor. By the time paramedics arrived, she was unresponsive. She was taken to the hospital. She died that morning. She was 12 years old. Her death was initially treated as a medical emergency of unknown cause. Nobody knew yet what had happened. Nobody had any reason to suspect that a bottle of Tylenol purchased at a local store was the source of what killed her. That understanding came later that same day. Within hours of Mary Kellerman's death, a 27-year-old postal worker named Adam Janus collapsed at his home in Arlington Heights, also in the Chicago suburbs. He had taken extra-strength Tylenol for chest pain earlier that morning. He was taken to the hospital in critical condition and died shortly after arrival. His family gathered at his home that evening to grieve. His brother Stanley Janus, 25 years old, and Stanley's wife Teresa, 19 years old and recently married, were among those present. Both Stanley and Teresa developed severe symptoms at the house and collapsed. They were rushed to the hospital. Investigators would later determine that they had taken Tylenol from the same bottle Adam had used that morning, attempting to treat their own stress and grief. Stanley Janus died 2 days later. Teresa Janus died the following day. 3 members of one family, killed by the same bottle. The connection between the deaths was not immediately obvious. People die every day in a city the size of Chicago and its suburbs. Medical examiners and emergency rooms were not initially looking for a pattern. It was a firefighter and paramedic named Richard Keyworth and a medical examiner's investigator named Helen Jensen who first made the connection. They compared notes on the cases coming through the system that day and realized that multiple people who had died or collapsed had taken Tylenol before their symptoms began. They brought their concern to the Cook County Medical Examiner's office. Toxicology was ordered. The results confirmed what nobody wanted to believe.
Anyone has taken a cyanide-laced Tylenol capsule, they probably wouldn't be able to make it to the phone to call.
Purchased at different stores
I'm Jeff Block,
across the Chicago
CNN,
suburbs.
at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center
By the time the
in
full
Chicago.
picture came into focus, there were 7 victims. Mary Kellerman, Adam Janus, Stanley Janus, Teresa Janus. Mary McFarland, a 31-year-old woman from Elmhurst. Paula Prince, a 35-year-old flight attendant from Chicago. Mary Reiner, a 27-year-old woman from Winfield who had recently given birth to her 4th child. 7 people, different ages, different lives, different locations across the Chicago area, connected only by a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol. What happened next was one of the largest public safety responses in American history to that point. Chicago police drove through neighborhoods with loudspeakers warning residents not to take Tylenol. Local television and radio stations broadcast emergency alerts. Stores across the Chicago area pulled Tylenol from their shelves within hours. Johnson & Johnson, the parent company of Tylenol, made a decision that has since become a case study in corporate crisis management. They did not wait for regulators to force their hand. They immediately and voluntarily recalled every bottle of extra-strength Tylenol in the United States. Approximately 31 million bottles, at enormous financial cost to the company. That decision is credited with saving the Tylenol brand, which many analysts at the time believed was finished. The idea that a product associated with 7 poisoning deaths could recover seemed far-fetched in the fall of 1982. Johnson & Johnson's transparent and immediate response, combined with the introduction of tamper-evident packaging, which became federally mandated for all over-the-counter medications following the Chicago murders, allowed Tylenol to return to store shelves and eventually reclaim its position as one of the best-selling pain relievers in the country. The tamper-evident seals on every bottle of medication you have ever opened, the foil seal under the cap, the shrink wrap around the lid, the cotton inside the bottle, all of it exists because of what happened in Chicago in 1982. 7 people died, and the entire infrastructure of consumer product safety in the United States changed permanently as a result. The investigation into who had poisoned those bottles was one of the most intensive in the history of the FBI and the Chicago Police Department. The logistics of the crime were analyzed carefully. The poisoned bottles had been purchased at different stores across a wide geographic area. The Jewel food store in Arlington Heights, an Oscar Drug in the same town, a Walgreens in Chicago, a Frank's Finer Foods in Elmhurst. This spread created 2 possibilities. Either the bottles had been poisoned before distribution, somewhere in the manufacturing or shipping process, or someone had purchased bottles from multiple stores, tampered with them at home, and returned them to the shelves. Investigators quickly determined that the poisoning had occurred after the bottles left the factory. The tampering was retail level. Someone had physically gone into stores, selected bottles, removed them from the shelves, and put them back after filling capsules with cyanide. The profile that emerged was of someone organized and methodical. Someone who had access to potassium cyanide. Someone who was either indifferent to or specifically motivated by the randomness of who would be killed. There was no apparent connection between the 7 victims. They did not know each other. They had no shared enemies. No one had a clear motive to kill any of them specifically, which led investigators to the most disturbing conclusion of all. The killer had not targeted these people. The killer had targeted everyone, or no one in particular. The deaths were random by design. Over the following months and years, hundreds of suspects were investigated. The most seriously considered suspect was a man named James Lewis. Lewis was a con artist and convicted fraudster from Kansas City, Missouri. Shortly after the deaths became public, he sent a letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million to stop the killings. He claimed in the letter that he was responsible for the Tylenol deaths. He was tracked down in New York City and arrested. But here is the critical detail. James Lewis was never charged with the murders. He was charged with extortion for the letter he sent to Johnson & Johnson. He was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. He served about half that sentence and was released. Investigators could not place him in the Chicago area at the time of the poisonings. They could not connect him to the source of the cyanide. They could not build a murder case against him that they believed would hold up in court. James Lewis maintained until his death in 2023 that he had not poisoned the Tylenol bottles. He claimed he had sent the letter to draw attention to a man he had a personal grudge against, an explanation that was as disturbing in its own way as the alternative. He died without being charged with the murders. Whether he was responsible has never been officially determined. A second suspect emerged decades later. In 2009, the FBI executed search warrants at the home of a man named Roger Arnold, a stock trader who had lived in the Chicago area in 1982. Arnold had previously been investigated in connection with the case in the early 1980s. He had possessed potassium cyanide. He had connections to the Chicago area stores where the poisoned bottles were found. The 2009 search did not produce charges. Arnold died in 2019. He was never charged with anything connected to the Tylenol murders. The FBI has never officially closed the case. It remains open. There is something specific about the Chicago Tylenol murders that has made them impossible to forget for over 40 years. It is not just the horror of what happened, though the horror is real. 7 people, including a 12-year-old girl, killed by something as ordinary as a bottle of pain reliever. It is the randomness. The killer, whoever they were, did not choose their victims. They chose a product, they chose a distribution method, and they let chance determine who would die. And that randomness is what makes this case uniquely terrifying, in a way that even other mass casualty crimes are not. A shooter, a bomber, even another poisoner, typically has some logic to their target selection, even if that logic is incomprehensible. The Tylenol killer selected nobody, which means they selected everybody. Every person who opened a bottle of Tylenol in the Chicago area in the fall of 1982 was a potential victim, and they had no way of knowing it. That knowledge changed American consumer behavior in ways that persist today. People inspect packaging before purchasing. People check seals before opening. People think, even briefly and subconsciously, about the safety of the products they consume. We think about it because of what happened in Chicago in 1982. Because 7 people died. Because whoever put that cyanide in those capsules was never held accountable. In 2026, Netflix is releasing a documentary series on the Chicago Tylenol murders. A new generation will encounter this case for the first time through that series and will ask the same questions that investigators and journalists and ordinary people have been asking for more than 40 years. Who did this? Why? How did they obtain the cyanide? How did they return those bottles to store shelves without being seen? Why did they stop after 7 deaths? Were they ever caught for something else? Are they still alive? None of those questions have definitive answers. The FBI has the case file. They have DNA evidence collected over the decades of investigation. They have forensic analysis that was not available in 1982 and that has been applied to the existing evidence as technology has advanced. They have not made an arrest. They have not officially named a suspect. The case is open. Mary Kellerman was 12 years old. She had a runny nose and a sore throat on the morning of September 29th, 1982. And her parents gave her medicine because that is what parents do. Adam Janus had chest pain and took something for it. Paula Prince stopped at a Walgreens on her way home. Mary Reiner had recently had a baby. 7 ordinary people doing ordinary things on an ordinary fall morning in the Chicago suburbs. The person who put cyanide in those capsules decided that their lives did not matter. Decided that the randomness of who would reach for that bottle was an acceptable outcome. Decided that 7 deaths or more, if the recall had not happened as quickly as it did, were worth whatever motivated the act in the first place. We do not know what that motivation was. We do not know who made that decision. We only know what it cost. When the Netflix documentary drops, watch it, talk about it, and if anything you see or hear triggers a memory or a connection, the FBI tip line at tips.fbi.gov is still active on this case. 43 years is a long time. But the FBI has solved older cases than this one. Leave your theories in the comments. Who do you think did this? Do you think James Lewis was responsible? Do you think the killer is still alive? Do you think the Netflix documentary will break something loose? This community asks sharp questions, and I want to hear what you think. Subscribe to the Unsolved Vault. Hit the bell. We are back every Tuesday and Friday. We will see you on the next one. Add to conversation.